Hello and welcome to another Skyrim video. Today I'm going to be covering my audio mods. You might be expecting to see large mods covering everything, but I decided to use a little handful of small mods to get my desired effect. This video is another being brought to you because of a discussion in the Discord server, which if you aren't a part of yet, check the description below for a link. After a brief talk about sounds, I realised I was pretty much the only one not using Sounds of Skyrim or Immersive Sounds Compendium. These are two fantastic mods that cover an awful lot, but I'm extremely specific about my tastes. That coupled with space taken are why I came up with my own setup, so with that in mind, let's get started. First of all, I wanted to make the open areas in the wild sound more full and lived in. I found to achieve this it took one simple mod, Louder Nature, Birds and Insects by Arendelle. This mod achieves a really nice natural sound to the wilds with two simple changes. Firstly, the birds and insect sounds are now 15 decibels louder, but they can also be heard from 7 times the normal distance. This does a brilliant job of making Skyrim feel more alive, and works especially well alongside mods like Real Wildlife, Insectopia and Birds of Skyrim. I'm going to be quiet for about 10 seconds now so you can hear the effect. Louder Nature, Birds and Insects achieves this feeling for a tiny 55.3 kilobytes. In contrast, a mod like Sounds of Skyrim The Wilds takes up 39.6 megabytes. Admittedly, it does add in a host more sounds to the wilds, but I find it equally impactful. If size wasn't an issue, I might consider making the changeover, but I'm more than happy with Louder Nature. Moving on to the dungeons. Here I use a couple of mods to achieve my sounds. Firstly, quieter dungeons and caves. This mod makes the sounds inside dungeons so much more immersive. It removes all of the sounds that just shouldn't be present, like the bashing, scratching, howling and tapping, all of the silly noises that don't make sense for where you are. And because of these changes you can hear footsteps, the water dripping, wind rushing through, enemy conversations, Draugr and skeleton sounds and things that are actually happening around you. It's how the dungeon should always have been in this game, and it makes things that bit creepier. On top of this I use Draugr sound effects, Call of Duty and Dying Light. This mod was made by a subscriber for me when I was getting started, and I love having it in my order. This mod, as I'm sure you've guessed, replaces the Draugr and skeleton noises with those of the zombies from Call of Duty and the volatiles from Dying Light. There's a good amount of variation here, but if it's too much for you, there's separate files for both of these sounds. These sounds work brilliantly with quieter dungeons as you can hear the occasional screech further away, which builds up your apprehension. And I'll pause for a bit so you can hear those sounds now. Quieter Dungeons and Caves comes in at a mere 42.3 kilobytes, whilst the Draugr sounds comes in at 505.8 kilobytes. Again, I'll compare this to a more complete mod in Sounds of Skyrim The Dungeons, which is 51.1 megabytes. And honestly, I would choose my two tiny mods over this even if I had unlimited space. The only feature in this that I'm fond of is the internal weather sounds, which come in most good weather mods such as True Storms anyway. I also find this package sometimes throws in sounds just for the sake of making noise and filling the space out, which for me detracts from any spooky or eerie situations. Up next I'm going to focus on my city sounds, or in this case, lack thereof. I tried everything to make the towns and cities sound much better, but the problem I found is most of these were just pure sound overload. So now I'm going to tell you that the best sounds in cities is legitimately just a good AI package. I use AI Overhaul 1.6.4, which I've recently done a video on, check the top corner for that now. This mod changes interactions between yourself and the NPCs, as well as how they interact with each other. You'll get a more lived-in feel and set of sounds as they're conversing. This mod works well with things like Relationship Dialogue Overhaul and Skyrim Reputation, which gives even more variation to conversations, but they're not entirely needed. I don't use them, but they would certainly add to your experience. AI Overhaul 1.6.4 comes in at a tiny 2.4 megabytes, but I'll end this part here because I've already made that video. Again, I'll briefly talk about the main mod that covers this, Sounds of Skyrim Civilization. This mod comes in at 73 megabytes, and sure, it does add a lot to the overall sounds, but again, it's just far too much. The sounds made cities too heavy for me with random noises from things that weren't actually there. It felt like making noise for the sake of making noise, so I quickly dropped it. But if you like the atmosphere of bustling cities, then this still may be for you. However, it just wasn't my thing. I've talked a lot about the Sounds of Skyrim files here, and I do think there is another option available for people just after one file, which is Immersive Sounds Compendium. This mod comes in at 28.3 megabytes and does a pretty decent job of filling out the sounds in the game and adding in hundreds of new ones and tweaks to the old sounds that does improve it overall. But I feel it suffers from some of the same issues as sounds of Skyrim, in that a lot of the time it's making noise for the sake of making noise. The parts of this mod that I love are largely combat based, and if the file were to be narrowed down to just that, I would grab it straight away. I suggest if you are going to use this mod, load it at the top of your sounds and let the other mods in this video overwrite certain aspects of it. And that's pretty much going to be it for my sounds. However, I do have some more suggestions to help bring out that little bit extra in your game. Such as music files, which for copyright reasons I can't really show off. But there are some really amazing options available for us, such as Ultimate Skyrim Music Replacer, Skyrim Music 2, The Witcher 3 Music Overhaul, Chapter 2 or Symphonic Soundtrack Replacement. There are a serious amount of options here, including a new mod that replaces the music with that from another of my favourite games, Final Fantasy X. Aside from music, you can also use sound mods to give depth to situations. Two that I love are Talkative Dragons, which gives some voices to the dragons as you fight them. I feel like the lesser dragons needed some love and way more character, and this really helps with that. I also love using combat player voices. This adds in some generic voice lines whilst in combat. I'm not a fan of the silent protagonist, and this goes some way towards rectifying that problem. And on that I'm going to end. I do as always appreciate those likes and subscriptions. I'd also love to hear what audio mods you're using to improve your game, so leave a comment with those. Either way, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.